Thursday, September 1st, I want to talk about Russian state media today. That's the focus of what I'm going to be doing. I just saw so many articles today that just lined up in a particular way. That's how I want to frame today's events. So I want to start with this. This was yesterday. Zelensky talking about the EU should ban all Russian state media. And I said yesterday, no, he shouldn't. The EU should not do that. They should pay attention to what Russian state media is doing only because you want to understand your enemy. You want to understand the other side. I get why he's saying it. He's saying it because he doesn't want, Russian propaganda to be going out through the EU. And I totally understand it. I just think it's wrong-headed. And here's why. If you listen to the other side, you kind of get to understand their mindset. And so that's kind of what we're going to do today. So we're going to start with this. Here's The Guardian. This is a contrast piece. Russian oil executive dies from, and The Guardian is British. Okay, so this is the contrast, or this is what we're going to start with, and then we're going to contrast with Russian state media, and then we're going to continue to see a bunch of Russian state media and see how they think. Okay, so Russian oil exec dies in fall from Moscow hospital window. So this is going to give you a lot of the facts, and then we'll compare notes. Okay, a senior Russian oil executive has died after falling from the window of a Moscow hospital months after his company criticized the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Okay, months after his company criticized the Russian invasion of Ukraine is an important point that you won't see later on. Ravil Maganov, the chair of the board of Lukoil, Russia's largest private oil company. That's who he is, this guy here. Okay. Lukoil said Maganov had passed away following a severe illness. Well, I mean, an acute illness. I mean, falling from he was sick for a while, but they didn't say like he passed away from the fall. Actually, it wasn't the fall. It was a fast stop at the very end, but he passed away after falling, jumping, something, who knows what it was. The Russian news site with close ties to the police suggested he may have slipped from a balcony while smoking. TASS claimed on Thursday that Magnov had taken his own life. Half dozen business people with ties to Russian energy industry have died in apparent suicides, and none of the deaths have been classified as murders. Well, that's really interesting. Lukoil was rare among Russian energy companies criticizing the invasion of Ukraine. So that's the Western media's version of this. Now, here's what you get in Russian state media. This is RT. It's Russia Today. You can't see it, like, you can't get it on like Roku, but you can go into Rumble and get it through Rumble on Roku if you want to see it. You can also look it up, rt.com, and you can watch it live. And I would suggest that you do, just so that you understand how they're thinking, not because you want to spread propaganda, because you want to understand. Ravil Magnov, the vice president and chair of the board of directors of a Russian oil giant Lukoil, died after falling from a building in Moscow. Well, that's not enough, but they do qualify and say it was a hospital, a top-notch medical facility that serves Russian officials and other elite clients. Law enforcement was on the scene to investigate the incident. The question is before or after. Okay, so we don't know exactly what happened. Lukoil also confirmed Magnov's death, stating that it came after lengthy serious illness. This is true. Now, this is what a metaphor almost for how Russian media works. This is true. It was after a lengthy serious illness. However, what you're leaving out is just as important, that he fell to his death after falling through a window or out of something. We don't know exactly what it is, after a lengthy serious illness. There's speculation that the 67-year-old may have taken his own life after receiving bad news about his condition. That could be or might not be true. We don't know, but it could be other things. Okay, here is another Western account about the nuclear power plant. Now, this is Al Jazeera, which generally I would look askance at, but Al Jazeera has done a masterful job of curating news about what's going on in Ukraine in a very even-handed way. I've got to hand it to them. I would not have thought that from Al Jazeera, but I'm giving it. So here is a Western, fairly good, fairly condensed Western view of what is going on. The fact set is there. IAEA chief Rafael Grossi said he wants the mission to establish a permanent presence at the site, at the mission. So the IAEA finally got to the nuclear power plant and is there. Their mission is there. Russia accused Ukraine of deploying as many as 60 saboteurs to Europe's biggest nuclear power plant ahead of the visit by UN inspectors. Now, this isn't saying that they did. this is saying Russia has accused them. The head of the Ukrainian military administration of Nikopol across the Dnieper River from Zaporizhia plant said Russian forces were shelling near the plant to try to give the IAEA the impression that Ukraine wasn't attacking it. Okay, so it's giving both sides of the perspectives. Okay, so that's what I want to show you there. Now, they don't really do the same explicitness. It's very one-sided here. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA inspectors, now this is RT, have reached the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant in southern Ukraine amid reports of renewed shelling and combat. The visit comes hours after Russian Defense Ministry accused Kyiv of dispatching commandos in an attempt to seize the plant. Now, there's nothing on the Ukrainian side suggesting that this actually happened, but perhaps it did. Let's say, okay, let's just hear the story. I'm not necessarily going to believe that, but let's say, according to Russian officials, the attack has been repelled. Here's another article about the same thing. The botched raid came shortly before a team of experts at the International Atomic Energy Agency, including the organization's head, Rafael Grossi, arrived at the plant in an inspection. The ultimate goal of the operation was seizing control of the plant, while the presence of the IAEA would have allowed the saboteurs not only to take cover from any potential Russian actions, but also to cement a new status quo, the military said. So that's assuming that the first article was true. We don't know, but this is kind of, it's only giving this like one perspective. So sometimes they only give this really narrow slice. Sometimes it's not even truthful at all. But what you get is this like this weird funhouse mirror effect, right? I mean, if you look at a funhouse mirror, let's look at this picture here. If we look at this, like it distorts in so many ways, right? This lady on the left is the actual lady in the picture, and then it could be way tall, it could be way short, it could be just way distorted, and that's how Russian propaganda tends to work, or Russian news through the state media tends to work. So, for example, here's a TASS article. TASS is also another Russian news agency. Zelensky regime on verge of conflict with its own military, Lukashenko warns. There's not really any facts. This is Lukashenko, who's Putin's ally, just speculating that the military and Zelensky are at odds. I see nothing in the Western media that says anything along these lines, but let's say. Another one, Germany made a fantastic admission, says Lavrov. Lavrov lies. I mean, this guy just makes crap up. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister. Now, this article is not a lie. This one's not, but he does all the time. Okay, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has described as fantastic a recent comment by his German counterblock, Annalena Baerbock, about Berlin's comment back in Kyiv. Lavrov delivered a speech. He said that many Western politicians are in the grip of Russophobic obsession. It's not so much Russophobic, it's anti-aggression. And there's a difference between the two, right? If it was a different country doing the same thing to its next door neighbor just like that, you'd probably get a very similar reaction, but given Russians, and so if it's a small country in the middle of nowhere, right, we probably wouldn't look at it. But Russia's a pretty reasonably big player, and it's upending the international order if it can just go over somebody's border. So it's not about Russia as much as it is about what's going on to its neighbor, international order, and all these other things. Okay, according to Lavrov, what German official said effectively boiled down to the following. Yes, our citizens are suffering, but they will have to suffer more because we will be supporting Ukraine no matter what. Now, they are supporting Ukraine essentially no matter what, and this is a fantastic admission. But why? What's going on? Well, if they can do this here, and there was an article today about Moldova, what's to stop them from doing Moldova? And then what's stopping from, right, other places wherever they can? Eventually, they'll keep going, and I'll talk about them keep going at the end. You'll see this. The top German diplomat said, if I give the promise to the people of Ukraine, we stand with you as long as you need us, then I want to deliver, no matter what my German voters think, but I want to deliver to the people of Ukraine. That was the actual quote. But this was the interpretation, and so it's generally true. I mean, if we look back at the funhouse mirror, it's largely true, okay? But the spin on it is really what matters at that point. Okay, now let's look at this. Putin explains the operational goals. Russia is trying to end the war waged on its own citizens after 2014 coup, Vladimir Putin says. Okay, Moscow seeks an end to the conflict in Ukraine, which began in the aftermath of 2014 Maidan coup. Now, they're dating it differently because the Maidan coup is the cause in Putin's mind, whereas the cause to Ukrainians' mind was Putin's intervention, creating a civil war, as well as to prevent the emergence of anti-Russian enclave in its territory. That means anybody who's not on kind of that uh, Russian kind of side of this equation. Everyone believes that some kind of aggression on the part of Russia is happening today. No one understands or knows that after the coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014, the people of Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea, a significant part of them in any case, did not want to recognize the outcome of this coup. That's true. There was a good fraction, maybe 20% to a third of the population, who was opposed to the president stepping down and leaving, and that is what happened. So that's true. But again, we're looking at the funhouse mirror, and it's kind of stretching the truth a little bit here to be saying that. Now, new post-Maidan leaders began a war on their own citizens and have been waging that war for 8 years. Actually, it worked the other way around. They didn't start fighting their own citizens. Their citizens started calling themselves independent and freedom fighters and whatever, and so that's what it was. So it kind of stretched the truth in a pretty significant way. Um, Down at the end, Russia sent troops in Ukraine 24, citing Kyiv's failure to implement the Minsk agreements. This is boilerplate. It's in all these things, but they don't say anything about the Budapest Memorandum, where the United States, Ukraine, and Russia guaranteed Ukraine's borders if they gave up their nukes. So, you can stretch the truth, but so far. But at a certain time, you start to distort it to a place where it's unrecognizable. Okay, let's go back to the next one. The next one's from Pravda. Pravda is it means truth, and it doesn't never deliver on that. Okay, Crimea governor. Ukraine will never exist anymore as a state. The head of the Crimea, Sergei Azanov, said that the Ukraine statehood would be liquidated completely in the future. Here's a quote: Ukraine will no longer exist within its 1991 borders, the official said. The border with the Russian Federation. Now, here's what it goes on to, and it says even more. Now, and again, this is what Russians are absorbing, and what's being just simply cut and paste by other news media that are lazy in India and the Islamic world and Asia and wherever else. They just take these things. The borders of the Russian Federation will be strengthened as much as possible, but the crisis is not going to subside, as problems from those territories will continue to arrive. Therefore, the end of the special operation in Ukraine is just the beginning of a very long crisis. That means they're not stopping here. And this is why they need to be stopped in Ukraine. And this is why the Germans understand that it's not Russophobic. It's we have to stop this at all costs because it's upending social order. Moscow will have to take a lot of effort not to let a powerful enemy grow near its borders, said the Crimean head. Okay. Pravda again, Russia may strike a nuclear blow not only on Kyiv, but also on Washington. Now, what they do here is they often find some expert somewhere to say something nutty. The attack will be conducted not only on Kyiv, but on Washington. Such cities as London, Berlin, and Warsaw may also be struck, said this particular expert giving his assessment. And they call that news. It's not really news, it's more like an opinion piece. Pravda again, Mikhail Gorbachev, the man. This was uh, the man who saved the world in Western lies of applause. This was a few days ago, and I talked about it. If you just go back a day or two, Gorbachev took the course to improve relations with the West. The West kind of mourns him, right? And they recognize that he was. They took Gorbachev's death with sadness. But they're not really keen on Gorbachev here. They're like, hey, look, the West promised that Gorbachev that NATO wouldn't expand to the east, and that was a lie. The West promised to respect the interest of Russia, and that was a lie. Gorbachev lifted the threat of nuclear war, but the West is taking the world to nuclear war. Who's promising nuclear war? It's not Gorbachev's side. It's not the West. It's the saber rattlings coming from Russia. Okay, so They're not really a big fan of Gorbachev, and it's really insightful to see why. They see Gorbachev as this figure that reduced their prestige, not this figure who dismantled a disgusting, um, uh, detestable system that was the Soviet Union and provided all kinds of freedom, but one who has taken down Russian prestige. That's the way that they're interpreting this. This is why you need to understand state media. Now, I'm going to end, and I usually end these with some RT or Pravda, but I'm doing the opposite here. I'm going to end with a Reuters article. Reuters is like AP, Associated Press. It's fairly legitimate Western news. There was this article today. The article I just talked about Gorbachev was a couple days ago. This one is today. Gorbachev died shocked and bewildered by Ukrainian conflict. And Gorbachev had some roots in Ukraine. Like this article even talked about how interesting Gorbachev was a Ukrainian. Russian Ukrainian. His mother and his wife, Rasha Gorbachev, were also Ukrainian. Mikhail Gorbachev often spoke with a Ukrainian accent. Khrushchev and Brezhnev were also from Ukraine. By the way, somebody reached out to me and told me that Khrushchev wasn't born in Ukraine. He lived in Ukraine most of his life and considered himself Ukrainian, but he wasn't born in Ukraine. So thank you. I'm sorry, I forget your name, but you were awesome. And if you go back and look at yesterday's, you can see who that was. And props to you. Awesome. Okay. But Gorbachev is really kind of, saddened by the conflict, shocked and bewildered, it said. Somebody who worked with him for 37 years said he was struck by how traumatized he was by the events in Ukraine. It's not just a special military operation that started on February 24th. It's the entire evolution of relations between Russia and Ukraine over the past years that was really a big blow to him. Now think about it. Gorbachev was actually a guy who opened up the world to freedom. The 15 countries beyond Russia who were dominated by the Soviet Union now have freedom that they never, to the differing levels, yes, like Lithuania and Poland have significant freedom that they didn't have before, and some not so much, but they have this great freedom, and he's watched it be kind of flushed away, and Russia becoming more and more and more authoritarian and insular, and it's got to be really devastating to him. At any rate, so this is why I want you to understand the difference between Russian state-sponsored media and what you see in the West. It's important to understand. Please share this with your friends, your Ukrainian friends, your American supporters of, or Western supporters of Ukraine, because they need to understand that this is just this bizarro world that you're seeing things through this funhouse mirror, and that's really what is being instilled not only in Russia, not only to Russians who are reading this, but then to the states that support Russia, because it's going into Islamic or Indian or Asian press, and they're just reading these articles hook, line, and sinker. Thank you for your time, and I'll be back tomorrow.